Hi, my name is Grace P. Cho. I'm a writer and editorial manager at 𝐅𝐸𝐥𝐥𝐥, an online community that creates resources for women of faith. I live here in Orange County, California with my family, and I want to tell you today about imposter syndrome and how we can face it so we can leave a legacy. In Romans 12:2, it says, "Let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think." The way we think determines the way we live and how we move in God's kingdom. But imposter syndrome tells us, who do you think you are? It makes us doubt our abilities, our gifts, our successes, our experiences. It not only makes us doubt God's voice, but our own voices, our identities, and our stories. It makes us afraid to be exposed as a fraud, that one day will be found out that we're actually not what we say that we are. This happens to me all the time. I'm a writer who's often afraid to write because every time an opportunity to share my words comes up, I'm afraid that someone will finally see that I am actually not qualified. My writing journey didn't start like everyone else's. I didn't grow up listening to teachers tell me that my writing was great or that I should grow up to become a writer one day. My journey actually started after I had my first kid in my early 30s. I was working as an associate pastor at a local church in Las Vegas. So from childhood to adulthood, ministry was all I had ever known. I was on church leadership, and everyone saw that that was my calling. Not only did I know it, but everyone else affirmed it. It made sense. Being a leader made sense. Being a pastor made sense. But being a writer, no one, not even I, could have seen that possibility in me. But what do we do when we feel called, when God keeps saying the same thing over and over again? Doesn't it just come down to the choice of either obeying his voice and living in obedience or ignoring it and living in disobedience? All I knew then and what I know now is if we love him, we'll obey him, even if it makes zero sense to us or to anyone around us. So that's what I did. I started writing. But because I never felt qualified from the beginning, my whole writing journey, and even now I still struggle with imposter syndrome. When I first got invited to write for someone's blog, I thought, I got it. You want an Asian face? I can do that. I can be your diversity. When I got invited to write for a devotional book, I thought, oh, they're only asking me because my friend put my name in. When I got invited to guest post for a big name author, I thought, surely there's no way that my words are good enough, deep enough, wise enough for such a big platform. At every turn, at every opportunity, imposter syndrome was right there asking me, who do you think you are to do this? And with each invitation, I had to make a choice. Either I could say yes while being afraid, while feeling unqualified, undeserving, but step into the things that God was inviting me into, or I could say no and feel safe, feel comfortable in what was familiar, which for me often meant going unseen and unheard. Maybe for you, you're thinking about starting a new ministry in your community or in your church, or you have a story to tell, but you've never written a thing. Maybe you're seeing a shift in your dreams and your passions, and you have more questions than you have answers for. And that's where imposter syndrome can seep in and start to make you doubt. But the next time you hear that question, who do you think you are? I want to give you 3 things you can do to face imposter syndrome and move into your yes. 1, preach the truth to yourself. Name the lies that you're starting to believe in, and remember who you are and who God is. If you need to, write it down. Write down your gifts, your talents, your successes, the experience you've had all these years, and write down how God has shown up for you and proven not only his presence in your life, but his power in making things happen. Number 2, reach out to your people. And by your people, I mean people who are safe and healthy. People who you can confess your struggle with imposter syndrome and who can meet you in prayer, truth, empathy, and challenge. And also ask them for feedback. But like Brené Brown says, don't take feedback from everybody. Take feedback from the people who have been in the arena with you, who have struggled, who have been scratched up and bruised, have been beaten down, but gotten up. They know the fight, and their feedback is valuable, not like the haters. Number 3, calibrate the way you think. Check your expectations about yourself, your progress, and your end goals. No one gets it right the first time around or becomes an expert the first 100 times. So get used to being imperfect and being uncomfortable in it. And just because you're called to it doesn't mean you're going to be excellent right then and there. Sometimes God calls us to something, but it takes time and practice to get good at it. But don't resent the process of progressing, because even in the midst of that, God can use us and speak through us. So as a leader, and especially as leaders of color who often find ourselves the first, only, and different, we will undoubtedly face imposter syndrome, and often. But let's not shy away from dealing with it head on, because the next generation needs us to. Because if we want to leave a legacy, we will leave one by living it and telling it. With each invitation I received to write, I said yes like this. With my hands covered out of fear and with lots of doubt, I wanted to take back my yeses, but I started saying yes more and more because I saw that my voice mattered, not only for me or my generation, but especially for the generation after me. The last time I felt imposter syndrome was when I submitted my story to a story slam. And that's telling a story from the stage, performing it for everyone to see, and competing for a prize. I wanted to be on the Moth for many years, and I thought, you know what? I will submit and try for a story slam that highlights Korean American stories, because I thought that would be an easier way to do this and to try this new thing. I had never done it before, and performing was never really my thing. I had preached on the stage. I had led movements or organizations, but I had never done this creatively. So after I submitted it, I thought I didn't get it, because imposter syndrome was telling me, well, your story's not that interesting or that great, or you're not a performer. You've never done it before. But then I got the email that said I did become a finalist. And as I performed my piece on the stage, I thought I did great. And I thought I gave everything of myself to it. But as they were calling the winners, they called my name and two other women, and we were the honorable mentions. And when that news hit me, I thought, well, that's imposter syndrome, right? I thought I was going to win the thing, and really I didn't. I lost. And so all these lies started coming into my head of, you didn't pick the right story. Surely you're not a good performer. Surely you should never tell stories ever again from the stage. And so I had to walk through those 3 steps. I had to preach truth to myself, which was God was inviting me into doing something creatively and something new. And so I had to tell myself, this is the first time I did it, and I'm not going to be an expert. I reached out to my people and I told them that I was having a hard time dealing with the loss of what seemed like a small thing, but what hit me in a big way on my creativity. And so I shared with them, and they spoke truth into me and telling me that I could do it again, that was only the first time, that they were impacted by my story anyway, because it related to them. And lastly, I had to recalibrate the way I was thinking. Even though I just told you that we shouldn't think of ourselves as experts, I thought, I'm a writer, I'm an editor. Surely I could tell a good story from the stage. But really, it was the first time. And so I know I need practice, and that only through practice will I become more excellent at it. And so that whole experience for me really is how I got to tell you right now how imposter syndrome works and how we can face it. Because as leaders, and especially as leaders of color who are often the first, only, and different, we will undoubtedly face imposter syndrome often. But let's not shy away from dealing with it head on, because the next generation needs us to. Because if we want to leave a legacy, we need to be living it and telling it. A single story from a single perspective isn't only dangerous, it just isn't enough. It wasn't enough for our generation, and we can change that for the next generation. They need to see themselves reflected in the stories and testimonies we tell, stories that are nuanced and varied. They need leaders who look like them, who come from similar backgrounds and families, ethnicities, abilities, gender, who can tell their story so that they can see also that God can break through into their lives as well. As the famous quote by Marion Wright Edelman says, you can't be what you can't see. And the next generation needs to be able to see what they can be. So let's let God transform us into new people, new leaders by changing the way we think. Let's preach truth to the lies imposter syndrome tells us, and let's tell our stories so the next generation can see and proclaim God's power.